Well, let's now look at, as we continue to look at these national elections, of course, things have changed. I mean, one of the statements made is that we are now in uncharted territory. But let's look at how the National Assembly is going to look like from a seating perspective. Of course, there on your screen, you see that graph just giving us that picture. Let's look at the parties then in this particular case. We've got there the ANC at 160 seats. Now, of course, this is down from 230 seats. So essentially, 70, seats are lost, by the ANC. So, of course, those are huge numbers and a big loss for the ANC. Now, when we move to the blue column, which represents the Democratic Alliance, the DA, they're sitting at 87 seats. Now, in 2019, they had 84 seats, which means an improvement by the DA in terms of numbers. So they're getting 3 more seats. And when we move to the next column, that is essentially the MK party. I mean, these are the biggest winners in this particular elections there with 58 seats. That's 58 new seats for this new political party that is barely 6 months old. So, of course, a big win for the MK party led by former President Jacob Zuma, as you would know. And then we move to the EFF. Of course, the EFF used to be the third biggest political party in the country, the second main opposition party. Now moving to 4th position there, the EFF had 44 seats in 2019. Now they're sitting at 39 seats. Of course, we heard from that press conference there from the EFF President Julius Malema saying that they welcome the elections, but also, of course, a little bit disappointed with their results, but saying that they will continue to fight on. So the next column then represents the other parties. And here we're talking, parties like the IFP, for instance, which is now moved to the 5th biggest the 5th biggest party. We're talking the PA party, Freedom Front Plus, Action SA, SADP. Now, you will, of course, know that the PA also another big winner here. PA always calling themselves the kingmakers. They've managed to secure 9 seats in the National Assembly. So that gives you a sense in terms of the picture we are looking at in terms of the National Assembly, in terms of seating. So as we are speaking, of course, a lot of jostling behind the scenes in as far as coalition talks, what is the next steps for the ANC as an example. I am now joined in studio by our politics editor, Mzwandile Mbeje, who is going to continue to unpack some of this picture with me in terms of what we are looking at. And Mzwai, good morning to you. And let's talk then about, what we are seeing from a national perspective in as far as the 3 top parties are concerned. I want us to look at the ANC, the DA, and of course, the MK party. I mean, the MK party has done phenomenally, which is why it's so surprising that following that briefing last night, the MK party's leader, Jacob Zuma, wanting the IEC to stall those numbers. I want us maybe to pull up that graphic that just speaks to the 3 top parties, and maybe let's speak over what we are seeing in terms of that picture. Let's start, in fact, Mzwai, here with the ANC, of course, quite disappointing for the ANC, sitting at 40% of course, in these elections, coming from 57.7% in 2019. We understand there's a lot of maneuvering behind the scenes in terms of those heavy conversations. Just your take on how this party performed.
Oh, well, it really is no rocket science that I think the ANC performed very badly. Losing 17%, that is quite a lot. And perhaps even worse is that it lost the majority. So it cannot govern on its own nationally and in several other provinces. So that is really a loss. And the reality, Unati, of coalition politics is here, and we can't escape it now. So we will have to work with what we have, because that is what the South African voters have decided. So in this event, looking at these political parties, so they have to work together now. So they have to find a way, especially if then the elections are declared, the results are declared this afternoon, this evening. So then the time frame immediately kicks in, so which basically means that in the next 14 days, I think the National Assembly should have set, and then you need to have formed government. So there's no time, especially based on what one of the major parties is saying. Yes, I think government can still be formed without them, particularly at national level. But I think everyone will have an interest to see what the new kid on the block does.
Let's look then at the performance from the DA as well as the MK perspective, just looking at some of these graphics as we continue then our conversation. All right, so the DA, of course, quite happy, in fact. I mean, one would have expected that it would have gotten higher numbers, but probably happy because we're seeing numbers now probably in the form of 2019. I think they were sitting at around 22% back then as well. So,
no, actually, why they will be happy is because they were able to reclaim the lost ground. Before Mmusi Maimana's era, they were sitting exactly where they are in terms of seats. I think yes, this is. And then now they lost. I think they were at 84. And then they've regained that. So it's a bit of an improvement. I mean, I'm sure they would be somehow happy that they didn't lose much.
Particularly in the Western Cape.
Exactly. Western Cape, that's where it's been suspected that they could lose. There is a factor of the Patriotic Alliance. And then there was also fear that perhaps the Muslim sentiment, given what is happening in the Middle East, which has always been voting DA, could perhaps walk away from them. So somehow the DA, I guess, is justified in being satisfied or even happy that it retained its majority in the Western Cape and in the National Assembly was able to add 3 more seats.
All right, so let's look then at the third top party for these elections, of course. It's not the PA. Oh, so it's Western Cape. Oh, so sorry. So we're looking at the Western Cape. Okay, let's stay in the Western Cape. I mean, we saw the Patriotic Alliance yesterday celebrating in effect because, I mean, these are 9 seats or 8%. So they've got 9 seats in the National Assembly. They performed very well in the Western Cape with 8%. Of course, the ANC dismal showing there with 20%. And of course, the DA, as we earlier indicated, with 55% outright majority. But the PA, you know, Mzwai, the kingmakers, always calling themselves that. But how did their narrative then carry through in the Western Cape to garner them a seat at the table?
I think there are a lot of factors, particularly when it comes to the Patriotic Alliance. Maybe in the Western Cape, perhaps, you know, that sentiment towards the colored votes. And Absolutely. I'll tell you why I'm specifically speaking about that. Even a party which was very specific, the Cape Colored Congress, did, I mean, very well because I think they got a seat or even 2 in the Western Cape. So that tells you that there's always been a feeling that you have, I mean, our compatriots are somehow marginalized, and if they find someone who's perhaps speaking to their concerns, they would then respond. But also PA, maybe outside of the so-called colored vote, they have been on a campaign of Abahambe. Yes. So that specifically is speaking to the issue of migration. So there's a lot. Obviously, there's a debate. Some people saying they may have benefited from that, but others saying, well, not really. Why? Because there are other parties who have a similar sentiment. It's just that they express it a bit differently, so they didn't gain much. So it's a lot of debate. So there are a lot of factors on that that affected and actually directed the outcome of this election. So you can't just pinpoint it to just one particular issue.
Absolutely.
So clearly, and as the results show, I mean, as much as the MK will be happy, oh, by the way, they are not happy because they were hoping for something even bigger.
Outright majority.
Yes, yes. But I think to South Africans, they feel MK has done exceptionally well.
Yeah.
No party has done like they have. I mean, I remember the first major breakaway which did so well then was COPE in 2009. They got, I think, 30 seats. And then the next big occasion was of the EFF, where they got 25.
Yeah.
So those were big then. So enter the MK straight to close to 60.
Completely surpassed those numbers.
And not only that, look at what they did in the second most populous province, KZN. They actually are the leading party there. They will form government there.
Yeah.
So quite interesting.
In fact, COPE, I mean, it made history, of course, getting, I think, over 1,300,000 votes.
1.3 million, votes.
Yeah, million. And then, of course, the ANC, the MK party then coming through with more than 2,300,000 votes. So that is a huge margin, I mean, I must say. But interestingly that you mentioned the CCC in the Western Cape, because we see now that they've also gained seats in the National Assembly with 2 seats. So interesting dynamics then to see how they will work closely then with other parties.
Absolutely.
But let's now go to another hotly contested province, and of course that is Gauteng. I mean, I would imagine that the ANC is definitely not happy with how they are faring there. I mean, let's just look at those numbers. At the moment, I think my eyes are failing me, but I think that's 35% for the ANC, and of course 27% for the DA, and EFF maintaining that 13%. But let's talk about the dynamics here. In Gauteng, we just heard a little bit earlier on from some of our viewers and citizens here of this province saying, you know what, change is good. We're actually happy that we are seeing this particular, these particular numbers coming in, because it will compel leaders, to work together to bring in the change. Will it though?
We have been hoping for that in the Joburg Metro, in the Ekurhuleni Metro, in the Tshwane Metro, even in Nelson Mandela Metro.
Yeah.
Has it happened? I am not sure. Are we better served? I am not sure. And I think that's why many people are so skeptical of the coalitions. Because, I mean, in Johannesburg, I can't even remember now how many mayors we've had. Because we've had a situation where we change all the time because of the instability of the coalition arrangement. Until we then set proper legal framework of regulating coalitions, I think we'll continue to have difficulties. But of course, as you have said in your intro there, we are in the uncharted territory. So I don't know how they will work at a much higher level. I know we've had some coalition government at a metro level, so which worked. In fact, I was just thinking about the Ekurhuleni under the ANC. At some point, it held on for 5 years. So sometimes it can, depending on how the parties do. And when the DA came in the city of Cape Town, it came through a coalition as well, and it held on as well. So it's also how you manage all of those. So, but at a national level, and I don't think you need a lot of parties because the interests can vary there. That is why the reality is that the big parties will be speaking. And Unati, it will be very interesting to hear what the Secretary General of the ANC will say. Who have they approached? Because they can't just sit. Time is running out. They need to be speaking to people. I mean, they are the majority party in terms of what the coalition gave us. So they need to be speaking. I heard EFF say, no, we are not calling anyone. We'll just sit and wait to take the calls, and we'll take the calls and put our demands or our proposals on the table. So, and by the way, despite that they have certain cardinal pillars, they did open the door to say we are going there open-minded, and that should tell you that as much as I'm very principled on this, but depending on what you say, I may just bend it.
Absolutely. So let's look at another highly contested province. Of course, we know that running into these elections, Gauteng, Western Cape, and KwaZulu-Natal. I mean, the game here has changed. We've been speaking about, uncharted territory so much, but that is, of course, synonymous to the MK party coming in at 45%, changing the political landscape as we know it, particularly in KwaZulu-Natal. The IFP coming in there at 18%, and of course 17% for the ANC. I mean, what is likely to happen here in KwaZulu-Natal as we look at these numbers and we look at possible engagements? Because there is no outright winner for this province as well, but you know, the MK party
is in the
really
leading
that post.
I obviously they will be speaking to each other, and I suspect the MK will probably speak to the IFP, and I wonder how the IFP will respond. But remember, Unati, I don't think anything is off the table. Some of the public pronouncements are just meant to get us talking or not talking. The reality is that you have contested the elections, and when you contest the elections to win. And then when the voters decide otherwise, the fact of the matter, you are our representative. We are forcing you to then sit down and speak. So I suspect the MK party will, in all likelihood, and I know that their first choice will be the EFF, because they are in some sort of very understanding arrangement between the two. But I don't think the EFF has sufficient numbers, particularly in KZN.
Yeah, so the EFF is currently at 3%, and of course they would have 2 seats, with the DA 11 seats at 14%.
And then remember the DA is off. Remember, DA declared EFF
off the table completely.
Enemy number
and then
one.
There's the NFP. I mean, are you surprised that they're still holding on?
Well, it's I guess towards the end, they did try to revive themselves. And I think people knowing the legacy of the founder somehow felt maybe they deserve a little bit of recognition.
All right. Okay, let's pause our conversation. Mzwandile, thank you so much for that. But let's now take a quick break on the agenda. We'll be back straight after this. Of course, we're talking elections. We're looking at that clock as it leads to the 6 o'clock mark, because that's the time where the IEC is then going to make that announcement in terms of the 2024 elections.